I begged a CEO to be my boyfriend for one night, then he said this. Chapter 1: The Begging. Katie Johnson lingered outside the ballroom doors, her hands trembling around the cream invitation card she had read a dozen times. Mr. and Mrs. To be Sutherland invite you to celebrate their engagement. She told herself she was going for closure, but really, she had come to prove to herself she no longer cared. The laughter and clinking of glasses seeped through the ornate doors. Inside, people like Bran, her ex, would be dressed in tailored suits and effortless confidence. She smoothed the fabric of her thrifted dress and inhaled, trying to summon courage. One night, that's all. Walk in, smile, leave. The ballroom was a chandelier of gold and glass. The crowd glittered with money and champagne. And then she saw him. Bran Sutherland, her ex-boyfriend, standing near the bar. His arm wrapped around his fiancée, a model-perfect woman whose diamond caught the light with every careless flick of her hand. He noticed Katie immediately. "Wow," he drawled, his lips curling into the same smirk that used to make her heart flutter. "Didn't expect to see you here. Still waiting tables, are you?" The laughter from the group stung like frostbite. Katie straightened her shoulders. "No, Bran. I'm doing fine, thank you." "Really?" He tilted his head, mock concern dripping from his voice. "Because last I checked, you were still renting that shoebox near the river." "What's fine?" "Finally upgraded to a one-bedroom." Her cheeks burned, but she refused to flinch. The old Katie would have run. This one stayed. "I came to wish you well. That's all." Bran's fiancée looped her arm around him, her smile sugary and cruel. "That's so sweet. You must be very brave." Katie's fingers clenched around her clutch. Then came the question, the one that tipped her balance. "So, the fiancé cooed? Did you come alone?" The crowd turned toward her, curious, pitying. Katie's breath hitched. "No," she blurted. "My boyfriend's just late." And as if summoned by some twisted cosmic joke, the elevator doors slid open. Every head turned. Landon Winters stepped out, tall, sharp, a portrait of controlled stillness in a black suit. The CEO of Winters Industries, and a man whose reputation for precision was almost mythic. He didn't notice her at first. His gaze swept the room with the detached calm of someone used to commanding attention. He carried silence like a weapon, elegant, restrained, dangerous. Bran laughed. "You mean him?" His voice dripped with disbelief. "Sure, Katie. The great Landon Winters is your boyfriend." Katie's throat went dry. The lie hung between them, heavy and absurd. Dozens of eyes watched her, waiting for the punchline. She looked at Landon. The elevator doors had barely closed behind him, yet somehow he felt like the only solid thing in the room. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Before she could lose her nerve, she stepped forward, her heels clicking against marble until she stood inches from him. His faint scent, clean, expensive, restrained, wrapped around her as she rose on her toes, pretending to greet him. Her lips barely moved. "Please," she whispered, so softly only he could hear. "Be my boyfriend for the night." Landon's head tilted slightly, dark eyes scanning her face. Surprise flickered there first, then recognition. "Katie Johnson," he said finally, voice low, smooth, and deliberate. "It's been a while." Bran's mocking laughter broke through the air like shattering glass. "Oh, come on, Katie. Don't lie to impress people. He probably doesn't even know your name." The sound hit her like a slap. The months of struggle, of swallowing pride and pretending not to hurt, pressed at her throat until she could barely breathe. Her voice trembled, but her gaze stayed steady on Landon. "Please," she said again, louder this time. The room fell silent. Landon's expression shifted, the cold precision melting into something far more human. He saw the desperation behind her words, but also the pride she was choking on. Slowly, he stepped forward. "I don't need to act," he said simply. The air changed electric, uncertain. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He reached for her hand, steady and unhurried, resting it against his chest. "I was wondering where you'd wandered off to," he said, his tone gentle but firm, meant for every pair of eyes watching. Katie blinked up at him, stunned. The warmth of his hand steadied her shaking fingers. Bran's smirk faltered. "You're kidding me." Landon turned to him with that faint, dangerous smile, the one that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be Bran," he said evenly. "Katie's told me very little." Bran swallowed. Well, we used to." "Good for you," Landon interrupted smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse us." He guided Katie away through the crowd, his hand firm at her back. The weight of every gaze pressed against her spine, but for the first time that night, she didn't care. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, cutting through the heavy perfume of the ballroom. Katie exhaled shakily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The laughter, the eyes, Bran's smug voice. All of it still rang in her ears. Landon walked beside her, silent. For a man known for his detachment, he looked strangely thoughtful, as if he too was processing something unexpected. When they reached the edge of the parking lot, he spoke quietly. "You don't owe them your pain." Then he opened the car door for her, polite but distant, and for a moment she wondered why he'd done it at all. Why someone like him would risk his reputation for a lie that wasn't his. But as the door clicked shut and the city lights reflected off the windshield, Landon finally understood why he hadn't hesitated. Of course, he remembered her. Not as the timid intern people had forgotten, but as the woman who had once saved him from a scandal that could have destroyed years of work. 2 years ago, a supplier had leaked confidential files meant to derail one of his biggest mergers. It was Katie, quiet, meticulous Katie, who had caught the discrepancy during an after-hours audit. She could have sold the information or ignored it entirely. Instead, she'd reported it privately, saving his company millions and his reputation from ruin. She'd never asked for recognition, never accepted the bonus he'd offered. She'd simply said, "You'd have done the same for me." He never had, until tonight. Now, watching her stare blankly out the window, her fingers still trembling from the humiliation she'd endured, Landon realized this wasn't charity. It was a debt long overdue, and one he intended to repay in full. Chapter 2: The Aftermath. Morning came far too early. Katie woke to the shrill buzz of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. The screen glared with messages from friends, co-workers, and one very confused landlord. Her heart dropped. The first text read, "Is this you with Landon Winters?" The second, "Girl, you're literally on the news." She fumbled for the remote, switching on the small TV at the foot of her bed. The morning show anchors were smiling too brightly. In breaking celebrity news, tech CEO Landon Winters was seen last night with a mystery woman at the Sutherland engagement party. There it was, her face, frozen mid-blink beside him in the photo, his hand at her waist, their bodies close enough to suggest things neither of them had said. The caption below made her want to crawl under the sheets and never resurface. "Winters' secret girlfriend? Sources say she's not from his world." Katie groaned and buried her face in her pillow. "Oh God, oh no, oh no." She spent the day rehearsing apologies in her head, words tripping over guilt and panic. When her phone finally buzzed again, an unknown number, she knew before answering. "Miss Johnson," his voice, calm and cool as polished marble. "Mr. Winters," she breathed, sitting upright. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for." "I know. You were just helping me and now the media. It's all my fault. I'll tell them the truth. Stop. That single word froze her mid-ramble. His tone wasn't harsh, just quiet, steady. There's nothing to fix yet.
Ive handled vers rumors.
But it's your reputation. He exhaled, a soft sound that might have been a laugh. You saved me too, Katie. She blinked. Saved you? I needed to look human for once. He paused. You made that easy. The words tangled in her chest. He didn't sound like a man saying thank you. He sounded like someone confessing something he didn't fully understand yet. She smiled faintly, uncertain. I didn't exactly plan on becoming a scandal. Good, he said, almost amused. Neither did I. They agreed to let the lie fade on its own. No statements, no public appearances. Just silence until the noise moved on to someone else. And for a few quiet days it almost did. Until fate, apparently, decided to test their definition of coincidence. 2 afternoons later, Katie ducked into a downtown cafe on her lunch break. The kind of place where no one looked twice at a struggling waitress in a second-hand coat. The bell chimed as she entered, shaking off the cold. Then she froze. Landon Winters sat by the window, laptop open, suit immaculate, radiating calm authority even over a cup of black coffee. Of all the cafes in the city, he had to be in hers. He looked up, eyebrows lifting in faint surprise, and then that small, knowing smile appeared. Katie Johnson, twice in 1 week. Should I be suspicious? Her face flamed. I work near here. Convenient, he murmured, eyes glinting with amusement. Join me? Every sensible part of her screamed no. But she found herself sitting anyway, her hands tight around a steaming mug. I didn't think I'd see you again, she said quietly. After everything, I wasn't sure I'd see you either. He closed his laptop. But here we are. Their conversation stayed light, awkward but strangely easy. He asked about her job, her mother, her writing. She asked nothing about his world, afraid of looking foolish. It might have ended there, if not for the woman with the sharp bob and tablet who appeared at the door. Mr. Winters, she said briskly, your driver's waiting. Also, you might want to know your name's circling on social again. He frowned. Why? She glanced meaningfully at Katie. Because you're having coffee with her. Katie's stomach dropped. Oh no. He sighed, then shook his head with a faint, resigned laugh. Relax. It's not newsworthy yet. But it could be, she said. People love a story that looks like a scandal. He leaned back, calm as ever. Then let them talk. I don't mind being seen with you. Her breath caught. He said it so simply as though he meant it. She tried to smile, but her heart was doing that unhelpful flutter again. You're going to regret this, Mr. Winters. He tilted his head, eyes warm. Somehow I doubt that. They agreed again to stay out of sight, to let things settle. Yet as she left the cafe and glanced back through the glass, Landon was still watching her, as though fate had just made another quiet promise neither of them could refuse. Chapter 3. The Deal. For a few blissful days, the chaos quieted. The headlines stopped recycling her photo beside his. The whispers faded to background noise. Katie almost began to believe that maybe, just maybe, life would return to normal. Then, one morning, her phone lit up with a message from her friend at the cafe. You and Mr. Talldark and Dividends are trending again. Katie's thumb hovered over the link. There it was, another blurry shot, her leaving the cafe, Landon Winters inside, eyes on her like she'd just rewritten the laws of gravity. Love brewing? Landon Winters' mysterious girlfriend appears again. Katie groaned. Perfect. The universe ships us. That same morning, his sleek black sedan stopped at the curb outside her apartment. She wasn't even surprised. Landon Winters was the kind of man who could find anyone, for any reason. He stepped out, immaculate as always. "Good morning, Miss Johnson. Is this about my unpaid paparazzi subscription?" she muttered. His mouth twitched. "My PR director believes we should lean into the narrative." "The narrative? That we're dating?" Her laugh was half disbelief, half panic. "You mean the narrative where I humiliate myself publicly and you get free humanization points?" He didn't flinch. "Exactly that." They ended up sitting across from each other in a small diner that smelled faintly of burnt toast. She watched him, perfect tie, perfect composure, and wondered what he saw in her except a walking PR strategy. "So," she said slowly, "you're proposing we fake date for optics, and when it's over, I go back to being tabloid background noise." He met her gaze, eyes unreadable. "Not exactly. When this ends, I want you to come work for me again. In communications. Officially." She blinked. "You're offering me a job?" "You were good at it," he said simply. "Better than you realized." Katie sat back, heart stuttering. After losing her confidence and quitting her internship before graduation, she'd convinced herself she wasn't meant for that world. The thought of stepping back into it made her chest ache with both fear and longing. "And the catch?" she asked. He hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. Inside was a neat one-page contract. "A 3-month arrangement," he said. "You attend public events as my girlfriend. I cover your living expenses for the duration. When it's done, you'll have a letter of recommendation and a permanent position waiting, if you want it." Katie stared at the contract. It wasn't the money that made her hands tremble. It was the possibility of being seen again, not as someone's ex, not as a pity case. She looked up. "And your rules? No real feelings," he said quietly. "No blurred lines." She laughed under her breath. "Right? Easy." Except it wasn't. Because as she signed her name at the bottom, she realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. Bran was old news. This was about proving to herself that she could rebuild from the ruin. And for Landon Winters, watching her pen scrape across the page, it wasn't just strategy. It was the first time in years he'd chosen risk over control. When they finally looked up, neither spoke. The silence between them carried the weight of a promise neither meant to make. The deal was done. And both of them had far more to lose than they understood. Chapter 4. The illusion becomes real. 3 months. That was the length of the contract. Long enough to seem manageable, short enough to pretend it meant nothing. And at first, it really did feel like an act. Public dinners, coordinated appearances, polite smiles. 2 professionals executing a deal. But somewhere between the flash of cameras and the quiet in-betweens, the act began to breathe on its own. Landon caught himself watching her more than the people he was supposed to impress. The way she folded her hands when she spoke, her instinct to make others comfortable, the dry humor that slipped out when she thought no one was listening. She was supposed to play a role, yet she moved through rooms like sunlight through glass. Effortless, unassuming, impossible to ignore. He started anticipating her small rebellions. The jokes she'd whisper when reporters were too close, the gentle teasing that cracked his controlled facade. During one gala, when he frowned at a photographer's flash, she leaned close enough for only him to hear. "You could smile, you know. It won't kill your brand." He had smiled then, really smiled, and the world had seen it. The illusion kept building itself. Their public dates no longer felt like rehearsals. The dinners grew warmer, the laughter easier. It was a dangerous kind of comfort, one that made both of them forget the expiration date stamped on everything they did. That illusion shattered a little outside a press conference when a journalist pushed too far. "Mr. Winters," the man said, voice sharp, "people are calling your relationship a PR tactic. How long do you plan to pretend this is real?" Landon's jaw tightened. He started to step forward, but Katie's hand brushed his sleeve first. She faced the reporter herself. "Pretend?" she said lightly. You're giving us too much credit. If this were pretend, don't you think we'd script something more exciting than board meetings and black coffee? The crowd laughed. The reporter flushed. She didn't stop. People mistake privacy for deceit. Landon doesn't fake warmth, he just doesn't sell it for clicks. Maybe that's what confuses everyone. He'd been silent through it all, watching her with a quiet intensity that unsettled her even as it steadied him. When they finally escaped into the car, she braced for the scolding. It didn't come. "You didn't have to defend me," he said. "I know," she answered softly. "But sometimes people need reminding that you're human." "Am I?" She smiled faintly. "More than most." Her reflection in the window hid the small tremor in her hands. His didn't. The following week, the distance between them grew smaller in ways neither acknowledged. They worked side by side late into the evenings, their professional boundaries blurring in the quiet hours when the city slept. Katie threw herself into the communications work he'd given her, desperate to prove she wasn't there just because of a contract. But exhaustion came easily, and confidence didn't. One night he found her still at her desk, shoulders hunched, eyes glassy from staring at the same paragraph for too long. "You're still here," he said. "So are you," she countered without looking up. He stepped closer, reading the draft on her screen. "You're rewriting sentences that were fine an hour ago. They don't sound strong enough," she murmured. "I don't sound strong enough." He leaned on the edge of her desk. "You keep trying to sound perfect when all you need is honest." "I can't afford another mistake, Landon." He hesitated, the use of his first name pulling something inside him taut. "You think I can?" he said quietly. "Perfection is just control wearing nice shoes." That earned him a small laugh. Then her voice softened. "You're good at making people believe you have everything together." "Maybe," he said, "because I don't let anyone see when I don't." The silence stretched until it wasn't awkward anymore. It was just charged. He reached for her laptop, scrolled to the line she'd been fussing over, and tapped the screen. "This is already strong. Stop trying to edit out the part that sounds like you." Her breath caught, eyes glistening for reasons she didn't understand. "Thank you," she whispered. He straightened, forcing space between them he suddenly didn't want. "Go home, Katie. Get some sleep." She nodded, but when she gathered her things, he caught her faint smile reflected in the dark window. That night, neither of them slept. She lay awake thinking about how he'd said her name like it meant something. He sat at his desk wondering when helping her started feeling like losing control. The line between pretense and truth had vanished somewhere along the way, and both of them were standing in the blur, pretending not to notice. Chapter 5: The Cracks in Control. The deal was supposed to run like clockwork. 3 months of appearances, statements, and public poise. But by week 10, the edges of their perfect arrangement had started to fray. Landon had been working himself past the point of reason. His schedule had turned brutal, back-to-back meetings, late nights, minimal sleep. Katie noticed the cracks before anyone else did. The shadows beneath his eyes. The wince when he thought no one was looking. The way he pressed 2 fingers to his temple mid-meeting, pretending it was nothing. That evening, they were supposed to finalize his keynote for an investor summit. She arrived at his penthouse with the new drafts in hand, expecting precision and control. What she found instead was Landon sitting on the couch, still in his suit, his tie loose, his eyes closed against the dim light. "Landon." He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was hoarse. "Just a headache." "You don't look like a man with just a headache," she said softly. "When was the last time you slept?" He opened one eye. "You're bossy for someone on my payroll. And you're stubborn for someone about to pass out." He started to protest, but when he tried to stand, his balance faltered. Katie caught his arm instinctively, and for a moment the roles reversed. She was steady, he was not. "I'm fine," he murmured. Sit, she ordered. For once in your life, let someone else handle things. Something in her tone left no room for argument. He sank back onto the couch, letting his head rest against the cushions. She moved quietly around the kitchen, returning with a glass of water and an ice pack wrapped in a towel. This isn't in your job description, he muttered. Neither was pretending to be your girlfriend, but here we are, she said, setting the ice gently against his temple. He chuckled low, weary. You really don't know when to stop saving people, do you? Her eyes flickered to his. Maybe I just picked the wrong ones. They fell silent, the hum of the city filling the space between them. After a while he spoke again, voice quieter now. Why did you do it? That night at the party. You could have walked away. She hesitated. Because Bran always made me feel like I had to earn being wanted. Like kindness wasn't enough. I wanted, just once, to be chosen, even if it was a lie. He opened his eyes then, meeting hers with something raw and unguarded. He was an idiot. That's generous, she said with a faint smile. You think I didn't notice you back then? He asked softly. You were the only intern who stayed late because you cared, not because you wanted something. No one's ever done anything for me without expecting a favor in return. Her heart squeezed. So, what do you want now? He studied her for a long, heavy moment. That's the problem, he said quietly. I don't know anymore. The air thickened between them, warm, electric, impossibly intimate. She felt it before she could think it. The space between their faces shrinking, the sound of his breath close to hers. He leaned in just enough for her pulse to stutter, and then he stopped. If I kiss you, he whispered, his voice a low warning, it won't be fake anymore. Katie didn't move. She just looked at him, her voice a tremor of truth. Then maybe stop pretending. Landon exhaled, breaking the spell, standing abruptly. Go home, Katie. The words were gentle, but his tone carried the weight of a man fighting himself. She gathered her things, her heart pounding, the ghost of his nearness still burning on her skin. As she reached the door, she looked back at him. Still sitting there, head bowed, the ice pack melting slowly in his hand. Neither of them realized that the moment they didn't kiss changed everything more than a kiss ever could. Chapter 6: The Fallout. The illusion couldn't have lasted forever. 3 months of careful balance, professional precision wrapped around something dangerously human, and one spark was all it took to burn through it. The spark came in the form of Bran Sutherland. He appeared online first, as men like him often did. Smug in his interviews, smooth in his lies. The headline read, CEO Landon Winters' girlfriend. A social climber with a past? Katie hadn't seen it until a coworker whispered her name in the break room, phone glowing in their palm. Bran's voice oozed confidence through the video. I dated her for years. Katie's clever. She knows how to make herself useful. I just hope Mr. Winters knows he's being handled. By the time the clip ended, Katie felt sick. She didn't bother defending herself. There was no point. Rumors didn't need truth, only oxygen. And Bran had given it plenty. Landon heard about it before she could reach him. His assistant slipped into the boardroom mid-meeting, sliding a tablet across the table. The whispers from the directors were already sharp and impatient. Mr. Winters, one of them said, her tone tight. This story's gaining traction. Investors are asking questions. Landon's jaw tightened. It's baseless gossip. Perhaps, but it reflects on the company's image. Dating a former intern, one now accused of manipulating you, doesn't exactly inspire confidence. He'd been through 1,000 board confrontations, but this one cut deeper. The implication wasn't just about his judgment, it was about her. Another director leaned forward. We're asking you to consider what's best for the company. Perhaps, some distance is necessary. Temporarily, at least. The word distance landed like a blade. Landon didn't answer right away. His instinct was to protect her, to call the rumor what it was, to expose Bran for the parasite he'd always been. But every pair of eyes in that room was waiting, weighing, watching his next move as a measure of his control. He exhaled. Understood. Katie waited in his office for 2 hours before she realized he wasn't coming back. When he finally did, his face was composed, but something in his expression had changed. Something colder, sealed off. "I saw the interview," she said quietly. "I know. They're saying I used you." He didn't meet her eyes. "We can let PR handle it. Best not to respond publicly." Katie blinked. "You mean pretend it doesn't matter?" He hesitated. "It's not that simple. The board." "The board?" she repeated, a hollow laugh escaping her. "You're worried about them right now?" "This isn't about me," he said too evenly. "It's about protecting you from more damage." "Protecting me?" Her voice cracked. "By pretending I don't exist?" Silence. For a moment, she saw something flicker in his expression. Regret, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I just need time to control the narrative," he said finally. "If we step back now, it'll calm down." Her heart twisted. "So that's it? We step back?" Just like that. He didn't answer, and that silence said everything. Katie nodded slowly, blinking hard. "You once told me you didn't need to act." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "I guess you changed your mind." She walked past him before he could respond, heels sharp against the marble, each step tearing something deeper inside both of them. Landon stood frozen, watching the door close behind her. He could fix a collapsing merger in a day, rebuild a company in a month, but he had no strategy for this. No negotiation that could undo the damage of his own restraint. For the first time in years, control didn't feel like strength. Felt like loss. Chapter 7: The Choice of Love. The cafe where Katie now worked wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Mornings smelled of espresso and burnt toast, afternoons of rain and second chances. She liked that anonymity, the comfort of not being someone's story for once. Until the door opened, and the past walked in wearing a tailored coat and a smirk. Well, if it isn't the girl who fooled the richest man in the city, Bran Sutherland. He looked different from the man she once loved, more polished, more self-assured. But beneath the confidence was the same brittle pride. He leaned on the counter, voice dripping with false ease. "Didn't think I'd find you serving coffee, Katie. Guess the fairy tale ran out of ink." She didn't flinch. "Bran, what do you want?" He smiled like a man who didn't know he was bleeding. Closure, maybe, or entertainment. Hard to tell these days. Behind his smugness was a familiar bitterness, one she knew too well. Once upon a time, he'd been the boy who walked her home after night classes, full of plans, full of promise. He'd made his first fortune on cryptocurrency, and when the money came, it changed him faster than anyone expected. Wealth had peeled back the mask, revealing a man who measured worth in numbers and validation. When she refused to quit her job to follow him abroad, when she'd chosen career over his ego, he hadn't forgiven her. Not then. Not now. "You always thought you were better than me," he said quietly, the smile gone. "The moment you got that internship, you looked at me like I wasn't enough." Katie met his gaze steady. "You were enough, Bran. You just didn't believe it." That struck deeper than she intended. His jaw tightened, wounded pride flashing behind his eyes. "You walked away without a fight. Because you wanted me to beg," she said softly. "And I was done begging." For a moment he had no answer. Just that flicker of old resentment, the one that had grown with every rumor he spread. His voice turned cruel again, a shield against the sting. "Maybe Landon saw the same thing in you I did. Something to use until it's inconvenient. The words barely left his mouth before a familiar voice cut through the cafe. "Careful, Bran. You're confusing projection with insight." Bran turned, paling. Landon Winters stood at the doorway, coat unbuttoned, expression calm, but his eyes burned with something cold and resolute. "Well," Bran said, regaining his sneer, "if it isn't the hero himself. Come to save her again." Landon's tone was low, measured. "I didn't come to save her. I came to finish what I should have said the first time someone tried to humiliate her." He stepped forward, each word deliberate. "You want to know why she doesn't need to fight you, Bran? Because you already lost. You got everything you thought would make you powerful: money, attention, and somehow ended up smaller than when you started." Bran's smirk faltered. "You don't know me. I know men like you," Landon said quietly. "Men who confuse being needed with being loved." The silence stretched until Bran broke it with a bitter laugh. "You think you're better than me." Landon didn't look away.
No.
"I just think she deserved better than both of us." Bran flinched, not from anger, but from truth. And for a fleeting second, something raw crossed his face. Remorse, regret. The smallest acknowledgement that he had destroyed the only good thing that had ever seen value in him. He turned to Katie. "You could have stayed with me. You would have had everything." She shook her head gently.
No, Bran.
"I would have had nothing." He didn't reply. He just left, the bell over the door jingling weakly behind him, his pride the only thing keeping him upright. The cafe was silent after Bran left, the echo of the door fading into the hum of the espresso machine. Katie stood frozen behind the counter, hands trembling, pulse still racing. The air was thick with the ghost of everything Bran had said, and everything she'd already survived. Landon was still there. He hadn't moved. "You didn't need me to do that," he said softly, voice low and careful. "You handled him long before I walked in." "I didn't need you," she admitted, turning toward him. Her voice wavered, but her gaze didn't. "But I wanted you to come anyway." He stepped closer, close enough for her to see the exhaustion in his eyes, an exhaustion that had nothing to do with work. "I almost didn't," he said quietly. "Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't think I had the right to anymore." Katie frowned, her heart tightening. "You always had the right, Landon. You just didn't use it." He let out a soft, self-deprecating laugh. "That's the thing. I thought stepping back would protect you, that keeping things professional would make it easier for both of us." His gaze met hers, unguarded now, stripped of all his practiced restraint. "But the truth is, it just made everything harder. I've been miserable without you." Something broke open in her chest. "You could have told me that before I walked away." "I know," he said, "but I was a coward. I've spent my whole life choosing control over connection. You scared me, Katie. You made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need." She blinked back tears, her voice trembling. "And what do you want now?" He smiled faintly, a crack in his composure that looked almost boyish. "You. Just you. Without pretense, without performance. I don't care who's watching or what it costs me. I just want you to come home with me. Not because it's convenient, but because it finally feels right." Her breath hitched, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You said if you kissed me, it wouldn't be fake anymore." He took another step, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "I remember." "So what's stopping you?" she whispered. He cupped her face gently, fingers brushing her jaw like she was something fragile and irreplaceable. His thumb caught her tear before it could fall. "Nothing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Not anymore." When he kissed her, it wasn't the desperate rush of reunion. It was the slow, reverent kind of kiss that feels like forgiveness, like finally exhaling after holding your breath too long. Her hands found his collar. His heart thundered against her palms, and for the first time, Neither of them was performing. They were just there, raw and real and entirely each other's. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his, laughing softly through her tears. You realize this is the part where everything gets complicated again, right? He smiled, tired, happy, free. Good. I was getting bored of simple. Katie shook her head, laughing quietly. You're impossible. Maybe, he said, brushing his thumb against her lips. But I'm yours. She smiled up at him, her voice a whisper. Then I guess I'm home. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars, voices, life. But inside that small cafe, time held still long enough for two people to begin again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was theirs, a love not built on rescue or reputation, but on the simple, miraculous act of staying. And for the first time, neither of them had to pretend to belong. They already did.